Hey guys, welcome back to Life Advice with Pedro. Today's our first video on a topic that was submitted to us, and I'm so excited to get into this. But first, if you have not seen our last video where we talk about our introduction to Life Advice with Pedro, it's really important that you see that first, and then you can come back and get into the actual topics. So click that video above if you haven't seen it yet. It talks all about who we are, why we're doing this, what our goals are out of this, so you have a good understanding about what we're doing. Go watch that, come back, and we'll go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, you are going to notice that the background's a little bit different. Each video that we do for Life Advice with Pedro, I will be using a different relaxing image that I enjoy, that helps me kind of relax and think about different topics for every video. Plus, it'll help you know that you're not watching the same video twice. So today's topic: holding grudges. So I kind of want to handle this in a pros and cons situation. I want to talk a little bit about the pros of holding grudges, and then I want to talk a little bit about the cons of holding grudges. But I want to start with why people hold grudges. And I'm going to make it really, really simplistic for you. I think there's 3 reasons why somebody holds a grudge. I could go into a long, drawn-out explanation of this, but it's actually quite simple. The 3 reasons why somebody will hold a grudge: ego, pride, stubbornness. As simplistic as that. People hold grudges and hang on to it because of ego, pride, and stubbornness. Pain is an actual thing. When somebody hurts you, that lingers. That stays. That's that feeling that you get up in your brain that doesn't go away. Happiness is something that's amazing. It's such a good feeling, being happy. But pain lasts a lot longer. So it's much easier to hold on to that and not forget it when it is pain. But because of your ego, because of your pride, and because of your stubbornness, it can really negatively impact you by holding on to these grudges. But let's talk about the pros of holding grudges. I believe that it is very important to hold a grudge, mainly because people need to know when they've done something wrong. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. So what's the wrong way to hold a grudge? Well, I believe that it is completely wrong to ghost somebody when you're holding a grudge. If you don't know what ghosting is, this is cutting somebody out of your life completely and without warning. So it's really easy to do this because confrontation is a scary thing. It's much easier to completely cut somebody out, not talk to them ever again, than it is to look them in the face or hear their voice over the phone or send that text message to somebody and give them the opportunity to reply. So, yeah, you could go through and you could block them on all social media. You could not return their calls and texts. You could just avoid them if you know them in person. You know what they do, where they work, in school, you know where their locker is. Whatever the situation is, you can just completely avoid it and not see them or speak to them ever again. But why is that wrong? If it's so easy, why is that wrong? Well, 2 reasons. First and foremost, you're going to be the one that suffers most. Okay? I know how that sounds. But you will be the one that suffers most. Because you will not get closure. It's going to be something that sits back there in the back of your mind. Every once in a while you think about it. You think about what they did. Especially if that type of situation comes back up with somebody else, you're going to think about that and you're like, ew. And it's going to have the opportunity to build, and it's going to be able to fester and just sit there repeatedly and just bug you, and you're never going to be able to let it go because it's just there. You never had closure. That door is just slightly cracked open. Every once in a while, some of that comes out and gets you. So you're going to be the one that suffers most. Now, the second reason why I think it's terrible to ghost somebody when you're holding a grudge is because they're never going to know. Now, I shouldn't say never, because some individuals know when they mess up and they just don't care, right? They're self-centered. They never really cared about you that much in the first place. And hopefully this never happens to you, but it does happen sometimes where they purposefully did this. And so those individuals will know, but hopefully those individuals aren't sadistic and they will apologize profusely for it. And so you know that they messed up and that they're apologetic. But all those other individuals, they won't know. And so when you ghost them, what's going to end up happening is it's going to become your fault in their eyes, because you ghosted them and they're not sure why. So you have become the problem. And that can become a big issue, especially if it's in high school or a workplace, something like that, where it can become like they start spreading the information to others. Like, you stop talking to them, you're the problem, you've done this, and even though they messed up originally and they hurt you in some way, you've now become the problem. And nobody wants that. So not only are you going to not have closure, you are now the problem in the situation when they messed up originally. That's not good. We don't want that. So that's why ghosting somebody is not the correct path. So what do you do instead? Well, you have to grow a backbone and you have to have a conversation with somebody. Plain and simple. You have to be able to step up and tell somebody when they hurt you, when they did something wrong that impacted you negatively. Now, some people, well, most people are going to become defensive in that situation. But as long as you go into it confidently, but not accusationally, so you're not just pointing fingers at them, you just go into it and say, hey, I want to talk to you about what happened, and explain the situation from your point of view. And you need to be open to the fact that they're probably going to have a rebuttal, where they're going to want to be able to tell you their side and why they handled it. And that's going to be very important for you, because you need to be able to listen to that situation. And I'm going to tell you this, and this is very, very, very important. You could be wrong. You could be wrong. You could say, hey, in this situation, I want to talk to you about it. This is what you did. This is how it hurt me. This is how I feel that you messed up. This is how it negatively impacted me. However you want to approach that. And they may come back and say, well, this is why I did that. This is the situation. This is why I had to do that. And you could be wrong. You could have looked at it like from one point of view, but realistically, you just missed like a whole other chunk of it. And that's okay. That's, once again, as we talked about in the last video, a learning experience. Okay? A learning experience is very important to grow. So now what's going to happen is that situation is going to come up again at some point in your life, because life is a very long thing and these situations repeat themselves over time. You're going to realize, like, okay, well, when the situation came up last time, because I learned from it, I realized I maybe was a little bit sensitive and I didn't look at the whole picture. And now that situation is going to come back up, you can be able to look at the whole picture and not have that negatively impact you. So by taking that, holding a grudge, right? You take that grudge, you have the conversation with them, you open yourself up, and then you guys can communicate, and you guys both can learn from it. Now, that doesn't always happen. That's like a perfect scenario. Now, if you have that conversation with somebody and they get defensive and they just start blaming you and you're the issue and blah, 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 well, at least you know. At least you know where their actual mindset is. They got too defensive, they got accusational, they start blaming you, and then you can start taking a look at that situation going, hey, I had the conversation with them. They didn't understand where I was coming from. They didn't understand why they hurt me. They didn't seem to really care about my point of view. And then it's easy to move on, right? It's easy to move on. So holding a grudge can be important in that aspect as long as you communicate with somebody. Okay? You don't have to forget that. You don't have to immediately forgive somebody either. But as long as you start communicating, you're going to start growing and you're going to start being able to have that closure. Right? So what are the cons of holding a grudge? Well, I kind of talked about them a little bit there. I'll make the con side pretty simplistic, right? Why don't you want to hold a grudge? Well, you're probably going to be the one that's impacted the most, right? Because you're going to be the one thinking about it. That's why you continue to have the grudge. You continue to hold on to that because you continue to think about it. It still negatively impacts you, and it still impacts your emotional side of things when you think about it. When it's brought back up, when somebody says, hey, why don't you talk to so-and-so anymore? And you're like, you know what? This is what they did. You're still going to be impacted, right? You were the one suffering the most. Even if they're the ones that get cut out, they're the ones that get blamed, they're the ones that everyone looks at and goes like, yeah, they messed up. You're still the one that's impacted the most. So holding a grudge in that aspect is the most negative side of it. And that's why going back and saying, hey, I want to communicate this with you. I want to tell you what happened and why it impacted me negatively. And being able to have some of that closure doesn't mean you immediately are like, hey, you apologize, everything's good, yay, we're best friends again. No, that's not always the case. You can still not forgive them, and you can still move on with your life eventually and end up cutting them out, but you're going to have that closure, and you're not going to be the one that's negatively impacted. So, what are my overall thoughts on it? I'm for it. I don't think immediately forgiving and forgetting is the most important thing. I think in some situations being able to move on from it is important, and you're able to learn from it immediately and grow and forgive and just move on. And those are minor things. But when somebody hurts you, when somebody impacts your emotional side, it's not as simplistic as that. If you try to just forgive and forget and move on with it, the pain is still there. It's still lingering. You still don't have closure. So I think holding a grudge is important as long as that leads to a communication. You know, to say, here's a situation, this is how I felt about it, I want to hear your side of it, and being able to have that dialogue. And once again, I have had that conversation with many people, and it has led to a dissolution of our friendship, and we're no longer communicating. I don't speak to them. Many people that this has happened with, I haven't spoken to in years. But I had closure, and I moved on from it. But those other situations where I didn't have that communication, where I did not speak to them, that's still, every once in a blue moon, I think about it. And I said, like, dang, man, I just wish. And like the statute of limitations, I guess you can call it, has moved on, and we can't go back and have that conversation of what happened 10 years ago. But I do think about it sometimes, and I wish I could have had that conversation back then. So guys, this was Life Advice with Pedro on our topic today of holding grudges. Make sure that you guys like the video, you guys hit the subscribe button, but most importantly, leave your comments down below. Let us know how you felt about holding grudges, and then what topics that you want to hear about in the future. Maybe we'll pick yours for our next video. Alright guys, that's it for today, and as always, be safe, have fun, and I promise we will see you guys again. Guys, that was some more content from us. We hope that you enjoyed it. And before you go, make sure that you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below so we know what you thought about it. Also, before you take off, there's some more content right over here. Go check out those videos. See you next time.